Marcus had always been fascinated by the grand palaces he saw in movies and documentaries. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, he never imagined he would one day stand before the magnificent gates of Buckingham Palace in London. The 28-year-old construction worker had saved for 3 years to afford this dream vacation to Europe, and London was his first stop. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Marcus joined the crowd of tourists gathering for the famous changing of the guard ceremony. He pulled out his phone, eager to capture every moment of this once-in-a-lifetime experience. The red uniformed guards stood perfectly still, their tall black hats creating an impressive silhouette against the palace's cream-colored facade. Marcus positioned himself near the front of the crowd, his excitement barely contained. He had read about this ceremony online countless times, studying the precise movements and traditions that had been performed for centuries. The discipline and dedication of these guards amazed him. Back home, he worked long hours on construction sites, but nothing compared to the mental and physical stamina required to stand motionless for hours in any weather condition. As the ceremony began, Marcus watched in awe as the guards marched in perfect synchronization. Their polished boots clicked rhythmically against the pavement, creating a mesmerizing sound that echoed off the palace walls. The crowd around him murmured appreciatively, cameras clicking and phones recording every moment. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. One of the younger guards, who couldn't have been more than 22 years old, stumbled slightly during a particularly complex maneuver. It was barely noticeable to most observers, but Marcus, with his keen eye for detail developed through years of construction work, caught the subtle misstep. The guard quickly recovered, but Marcus could see the embarrassment flash across the young man's face. Despite their training to remain expressionless, there was a hint of frustration in the guard's eyes. Marcus felt a wave of sympathy for the young soldier, remembering his own early days on construction sites when every mistake felt magnified under the watchful eyes of experienced workers. As the ceremony continued, Marcus noticed something else. The same guard seemed increasingly uncomfortable, occasionally shifting his weight almost imperceptibly. Being familiar with physical strain from his demanding job, Marcus recognized the signs of someone fighting through discomfort or pain. The crowd began to disperse as the ceremony concluded, but Marcus lingered, drawn by an inexplicable urge to get a closer look at the guards as they prepared to return to their posts. He had always been curious about people and their stories, often wondering about the lives behind the uniforms he encountered in his travels. Moving closer to the palace fence, Marcus observed the guards with renewed interest. The young guard who had stumbled earlier was now standing at his designated post, but something was clearly wrong. His face had grown pale, and despite his best efforts to maintain the stoic demeanor expected of palace guards, small beads of sweat were forming on his forehead. Marcus's concern grew as he watched the guard struggle. Having worked in physically demanding conditions for years, he recognized the warning signs of someone about to collapse. The construction worker's instincts kicked in, the same protective nature that had made him a respected safety supervisor on job sites. Other tourists continued to take photos and chat among themselves, seemingly unaware of the guard's distress. Marcus felt torn between respecting the formal protocol surrounding the palace guards and his genuine concern for another human being's well-being. The situation took a dramatic turn when the young guard began to sway noticeably. Marcus could see the internal battle playing out on the soldier's face as he fought to maintain his composure, while clearly struggling with some form of physical distress. The rigid training and pride of the guards prevented the young man from breaking protocol, even as his body was failing him. Marcus's protective instincts intensified as he realized no one else seemed to notice or care about the guard's condition. The other guards maintained their positions, following protocol that prevented them from assisting their colleague without explicit orders. Tourists continued their activities, viewing the guards more as living statues than human beings who might need help. The construction worker found himself in an impossible situation. Every fiber of his being wanted to help, but he was acutely aware that approaching a palace guard could result in serious consequences. He had read about the strict security measures surrounding royal residences and knew that any unusual behavior could be interpreted as a threat. As Marcus wrestled with his conscience, the young guard's condition deteriorated further. The soldier's breathing became labored and his typically perfect posture began to falter. It was clear that pride and training were the only things keeping him upright. But Marcus could see that both were rapidly failing against whatever physical ailment was affecting the young man. The moment of decision arrived when the guard's legs began to buckle. Marcus watched in horror as the young soldier fought valiantly to remain standing, his face contorting with effort and pain. The weapon secured to the guard's uniform seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, contributing to his struggle to maintain proper form. Without fully processing the potential consequences, Marcus felt his body moving forward. Years of looking out for his co-workers on dangerous construction sites had created an automatic response to potential danger. He couldn't stand by and watch someone suffer when he had the ability to help. The American construction worker pushed through the remaining crowd, his heart pounding as he approached the palace fence. He knew he was about to cross a line that could land him in serious trouble, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to remain a passive observer while someone clearly needed assistance. As Marcus drew closer, he could see the desperation in the young guard's eyes. The soldier was fighting a losing battle against his own body, and the rigid protocols of his position prevented him from seeking the help he desperately needed. The weapon at his side had become a burden rather than a tool, weighing him down as he struggled to maintain consciousness. The construction worker took a deep breath, knowing that his next actions would change everything. He was about to do something that would shock everyone present and create a situation unlike anything the palace guards had encountered during their ceremonial duties. Marcus climbed over the low barrier that separated tourists from the palace grounds, his construction workers' agility serving him well. Several people in the crowd gasped and pointed, but he focused entirely on the struggling guard ahead of him. The young soldier's eyes widened in alarm as he saw the American approaching, but his training prevented him from moving or calling out. The construction worker could see panic beginning to set in the guard's expression, not just from his physical distress but from the unprecedented situation unfolding before him. Palace guards were trained for many scenarios, but having a tourist breach the perimeter to offer assistance was not covered in any manual. As Marcus drew within arm's reach, the guard made a desperate attempt to step backward, but his weakened state made the movement clumsy and ineffective. The soldier's ceremonial weapon, a beautifully crafted but functional piece, shifted awkwardly at his side as he tried to maintain both his position and his composure. Marcus raised his hands in a peaceful gesture, speaking in a calm, steady voice that he had perfected during years of de-escalating tense situations on construction sites. He had learned that the right tone could prevent accidents and misunderstandings, skills that proved invaluable in this moment. The guard's breathing became increasingly rapid and shallow, his face now ashen despite the morning chill. Marcus recognized these symptoms from a co-worker who had suffered a similar episode during a particularly hot summer day on a rooftop project. Time was running out and conventional help seemed too far away. Suddenly, the young guard's knees gave way completely. Marcus lunged forward, catching the soldier just as he began to collapse. The guard's weapon, loosened by the sudden movement, slipped from its secure position and fell toward the ground. Without thinking, Marcus reached out with his free hand and grabbed the ceremonial piece before it could hit the pavement. The moment Marcus's fingers closed around the weapon, everything changed. Shouts erupted from multiple directions as other guards who had been maintaining their ceremonial positions suddenly broke protocol. The construction worker found himself holding an unconscious palace guard in one arm and the soldier's weapon in his other hand. Surrounded by increasingly urgent voices, security personnel who had been discreetly positioned around the palace grounds appeared seemingly from nowhere. Marcus could hear the heavy footsteps of approaching officers, their radios crackling with urgent communications. He realized that what had started as an act of compassion had quickly escalated into what appeared to be a serious security breach. The unconscious guard in Marcus's arms was completely limp, his breathing shallow but steady. The construction worker's priority remained the young man's well-being, but he was acutely aware that his current position holding both the guard and the weapon could be easily misinterpreted by security forces trained to respond to potential threats. Marcus gently lowered the guard to the ground, placing the weapon carefully beside them, while keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He had enough experience with security protocols from construction sites near government buildings to know that sudden movements could escalate an already tense situation. The first security officer to reach them was a stern-faced woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her hand rested on her radio as she assessed the scene, taking in the unconscious guard, the American tourist kneeling beside him, and the ceremonial weapon lying nearby. Marcus immediately began explaining the situation. His voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. He described witnessing the guard's distress, the soldier's obvious struggle to remain standing, and his decision to intervene when collapse became inevitable. His construction background had taught him the importance of clear, factual communication during emergency situations. Additional security personnel formed a perimeter around the scene while maintaining a professional distance. Marcus could see them speaking into their radios, undoubtedly reporting the unprecedented situation to their superiors. Palace security had protocols for many scenarios, but a tourist catching a collapsing guard and temporarily holding his weapon was certainly not a common occurrence. The unconscious guard began to stir slightly, soft groans escaping his lips as consciousness slowly returned. Marcus felt relief wash over him as the young man's color began to improve. Whatever had caused the episode seemed to be passing, though the soldier would clearly need medical attention. Paramedics arrived with impressive speed, their professional efficiency evident as they quickly assessed the guard's condition. Marcus stepped back to give them room to work, but remained close enough to answer questions about what he had observed before the collapse. His detailed account of the guard's symptoms proved valuable to the medical team. As the paramedics worked, more officials arrived on the scene. Marcus recognized the unmistakable authority of senior palace staff, their formal attire and measured movements indicating their high-ranking positions within the royal household's hierarchy. The situation had clearly escalated beyond a simple medical emergency. The construction worker watched as the officials conferred in hushed tones, occasionally glancing in his direction. He understood that his actions, while well-intentioned, had created a complex situation that would require careful handling. Royal protocols existed for good reasons, and his breach of those protocols, regardless of motive, would need to be addressed. A distinguished gentleman in his 60s approached Marcus, introducing himself as a senior palace administrator. His manner was formal but not hostile, suggesting that the initial assessment of the situation had been favorable. Marcus prepared to provide a complete account of his actions and motivations. The administrator listened carefully as Marcus recounted the events, asking thoughtful questions about the guard's condition and the construction workers' observations. His professional demeanor suggested extensive experience handling unusual situations that arose within the palace environment. Meanwhile, the young guard was being prepared for transport to receive proper medical care. As the paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, the soldier's eyes found Marcus's face. Despite his weakened condition, the guard managed a small nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that spoke volumes about his gratitude for the Americans' intervention. The ceremonial weapon had been carefully secured by palace staff, its brief time in civilian hands documented and noted. Marcus understood that every aspect of this incident would be thoroughly investigated and recorded, as was appropriate for any breach of palace security protocols. As the crowd of tourists was gradually dispersed and normal operations resumed, Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being both a potential security threat and a good Samaritan. The dichotomy of his situation was not lost on him, as he waited to learn what consequences his spontaneous act of assistance might bring. The senior palace administrator, who introduced himself as Mr. Pemberton, guided Marcus to a small but elegantly appointed office within the palace complex. The construction worker had expected to be questioned in a sterile security room, but instead found himself surrounded by portraits of former royals and antique furniture that spoke to centuries of British history. Mr. Pemberton offered Marcus tea, a gesture that seemed oddly civilized given the circumstances. The American accepted gratefully, his nerves still settling from the intense situation outside. As they waited for the tea service, Pemberton explained that several people would need to speak with Marcus about the incident, but assured him that his actions were being viewed as humanitarian rather than threatening. The first person to join them was Detective Inspector Sarah Collins from the Metropolitan Police, whose jurisdiction included palace security matters. Despite her official capacity, her demeanor was professional but understanding. She had already reviewed witness statements and security footage of the incident, which painted a clear picture of Marcus's motivations and actions. Detective Inspector Collins asked Marcus to walk through the events once more, this time with particular attention to his decision-making process. The construction worker explained his background in workplace safety, his ability to recognize signs of physical distress, and his split-second decision to intervene when the guard began to collapse. As Marcus recounted grabbing the weapon to prevent it from hitting the ground, Detective Inspector Collins nodded with understanding. Her investigation had already established that the American had made no threatening gestures with the ceremonial piece and had immediately placed it safely aside while attending to the guard's medical needs. The questioning was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel James Whitmore, the commanding officer responsible for the palace guards. His military bearing was evident in every movement, but his expression showed more curiosity than hostility. He had spent the past hour reviewing the incident with his staff and gathering information about the guard who had collapsed. Colonel Whitmore explained that the young guard, Private Thompson, had been battling a mild illness but had reported for duty anyway, not wanting to disappoint his unit. The soldier's dedication to duty, while admirable, had nearly resulted in a more serious medical emergency. Marcus's intervention had likely prevented Private Thompson from suffering a dangerous fall onto the hard pavement. The colonel's perspective on the incident was enlightening for Marcus. Rather than viewing the Americans' actions as a security breach, Whitmore saw them as evidence of the kind of character that military personnel were trained to embody, putting others' welfare above personal considerations. The construction worker's quick thinking and decisive action had impressed the career military officer. Mr. Pemberton returned to the conversation, explaining that palace officials had been in contact with senior members of the royal household throughout the investigation. The unprecedented nature of the incident required careful consideration at the highest levels. But initial reactions had been surprisingly positive. Marcus learned that his background had been quickly researched during the investigation. His clean criminal record, stable employment history, and reputation as a safety-conscious worker had all contributed to the favorable assessment of his character. Even his social media profiles had been reviewed, revealing a person genuinely interested in travel and cultural experiences. The most surprising revelation came when Mr. Pemberton announced that one of the senior royals had personally reviewed the incident and wanted to meet Marcus. The construction worker from Ohio could hardly believe that his spontaneous act of assistance had attracted attention at such an elevated level of the British monarchy. Detective Inspector Collins concluded her questioning by informing Marcus that no charges would be filed against him. The investigation had clearly established that his actions were motivated by genuine concern for another person's welfare, and that he had handled the situation with remarkable composure and responsibility, ordinal. Whitmore added that Private Thompson was recovering well at a nearby hospital and had specifically requested to thank Marcus personally once he was feeling better. The young guard's grateful acknowledgement of the American's help had been noted by his superior officers and would become part of the official record of the incident. As the formal questioning concluded, Marcus was surprised to learn that his day at the palace was far from over. Mr. Pemberton explained that arrangements were being made for the American to meet with additional palace staff and possibly even a member of the royal family who wanted to personally acknowledge his actions. The construction worker was escorted to another area of the palace, this one even more formal and impressive than where he had been questioned. The walls were lined with paintings and photographs documenting centuries of royal history, and Marcus found himself walking on carpets that had likely been stepped on by generations of monarchs. A lady-in-waiting named Mrs. Hartford greeted Marcus with warmth that surprised him. She explained that word of his actions had spread quickly through the palace staff, many of whom had worked alongside the palace guards for years and considered them part of their extended family. Marcus's assistance to Private Thompson had earned him genuine appreciation from people who cared about the young soldier's well-being. Mrs. Hartford provided Marcus with background information about the palace guards, explaining their rigorous training and the pride they took in their ceremonial duties. She helped him understand why Private Thompson had been so reluctant to break protocol, even when feeling ill, and why Marcus's intervention had been so crucial in preventing a potentially serious situation. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a senior equerry, whose formal announcement indicated that Marcus was about to meet someone of considerable importance within the royal household. The construction worker straightened his clothes as best he could, acutely aware that his casual tourist attire was hardly appropriate for a formal royal meeting. As they walked through increasingly grand hallways, Mrs. Hartford offered gentle guidance on proper etiquette for meeting royalty. Marcus appreciated her patient instruction, though he couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by the surreal nature of his situation. He had awakened that morning as a tourist hoping to see the changing of the guard ceremony, and now found himself preparing for an audience with British royalty. The anticipation building within Marcus was unlike anything he had experienced before. His act of spontaneous compassion had set in motion a series of events that defied all his expectations about how such a situation might unfold. Rather than facing punishment for his breach of protocol, he was being welcomed and honored by the very institution he had inadvertently disrupted. Marcus was led into an elegant drawing room where afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating portraits of past monarchs and creating an atmosphere of dignified grandeur. Mrs. Hartford instructed him to wait while she announced his arrival, leaving him alone with his racing thoughts and the overwhelming reality of where he found himself. The construction worker from Ohio examined his surroundings with wonder and disbelief. The furniture appeared to be authentic antiques, each piece carefully maintained and positioned with precision. Fresh flowers in crystal vases added color to the formal setting, and Marcus could detect the faint scent of polish and old wood that spoke to centuries of careful preservation. His contemplation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps and quiet conversation in the hallway outside. Marcus straightened his posture, trying to remember Mrs. Hartford's quick lesson on royal etiquette, while fighting off waves of nervousness about the impending meeting. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Hartford, followed by a distinguished woman in her 60s wearing a navy blue dress and pearl necklace. Her bearing was unmistakably regal, yet her smile was warm and genuine as she approached Marcus. He recognized her immediately as Princess Anne, known for her dedication to charitable work and her no-nonsense approach to royal duties. Princess Anne extended her hand to Marcus, who managed a respectful handshake while fighting the urge to bow awkwardly. Her grip was firm and confident, reflecting her reputation as someone who preferred substance over ceremony. She gestured for him to sit, taking a chair across from him with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to putting others at ease in formal settings. The princess began their conversation by asking about Marcus's background and his impressions of London. Her genuine interest in his experiences as a construction worker and his journey to England helped dispel some of his nervousness. She possessed the rare royal ability to make even extraordinary circumstances feel like a natural conversation between equals. Princess Anne then turned to the morning's events, expressing her personal gratitude for Marcus's assistance to Private Thompson. She explained that she had worked closely with military personnel throughout her life and understood the culture of dedication and duty that had prevented the young guard from seeking help when he needed it most. The princess revealed that Private Thompson's commanding officers had provided her with a full report on the incident, including detailed accounts from multiple witnesses and security footage. Every aspect of Marcus's behavior had been scrutinized, and the consensus was unanimous that his actions had been both necessary and admirable. Marcus learned that Private Thompson had been diagnosed with a severe case of dehydration combined with low blood sugar, conditions that could have resulted in serious injury if he had collapsed without assistance. The construction worker's quick recognition of the symptoms and immediate intervention had potentially saved the young soldier from significant harm. Princess Anne shared her perspective on the delicate balance between maintaining royal protocol and recognizing exceptional circumstances. She acknowledged that Marcus had technically violated established procedures by entering restricted areas, but emphasized that his motivations and actions demonstrated the kind of character that deserved recognition rather than punishment. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Princess Anne mentioned that news of the incident had reached other members of the royal family. The construction workers' selfless actions had resonated particularly strongly with those who had dedicated their lives to public service and understood the importance of putting others' welfare above personal considerations. Marcus was stunned to learn that arrangements were being made for him to meet with additional members of the royal family who wanted to personally thank him for his assistance to Private Thompson. The American struggled to process The reality that his spontaneous act of compassion was being acknowledged at the highest levels of British society. Princess Anne explained that the royal family had discussed various ways to recognize Marcus's actions, ultimately deciding that personal meetings and formal acknowledgement would be more meaningful than traditional rewards. She emphasized that genuine acts of human kindness, especially those performed without expectation of recognition, aligned perfectly with the values the monarchy sought to promote. The princess then surprised Marcus by asking about his future travel plans and expressing interest in ensuring that his remaining time in London would be memorable for positive reasons. She arranged for him to receive special access to parts of the palace not normally open to tourists, along with guided tours that would provide historical context for the places he had seen only briefly. As their formal meeting drew to a close, Princess Anne stood and walked to an antique desk, retrieving a small leather portfolio. She explained that she wanted to present Marcus with something tangible to commemorate both his visit to England and his exemplary actions at the palace. Inside the portfolio was a formal letter of commendation signed by Princess Anne herself, along with photographs documenting the morning's events and Marcus's meeting with members of the royal household. The princess explained that few civilians had ever received such recognition from the royal family, making the gesture even more meaningful. Marcus accepted the portfolio with hands that trembled slightly from emotion and disbelief. The construction worker who had awakened that morning planning to take tourist photos was now receiving official recognition from British royalty for an act he had performed instinctively without considering potential consequences. Princess Anne concluded their meeting by informing Marcus that Private Thompson was recovering well and had expressed strong interest in meeting the American who had helped him. She arranged for Marcus to visit the young guard at the hospital the following day, emphasizing that such meetings between civilians and military personnel were extremely rare and reflected the exceptional nature of the circumstances. As Mrs. Hartford prepared to escort Marcus to his next appointment, Princess Anne offered a final observation that would stay with the construction worker long after his return to Ohio. She noted that Marcus's actions had demonstrated that true nobility came not from birth or title, but from the willingness to help others without regard for personal consequences. The meeting concluded with Princess Anne expressing her hope that Marcus would consider returning to England in the future, perhaps under less dramatic circumstances. She assured him that he would always be welcome at royal events and functions, a privilege extended to very few foreign civilians. Marcus left the drawing room feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of recognition he had received for what he considered a simple human response to another person's distress. The formal acknowledgement from Princess Anne had transformed his understanding of the morning's events and their significance within the context of royal tradition and protocol. The following morning, Marcus found himself in the unexpected position of being escorted by palace security to St. Mary's Hospital in central London. The same officials who had investigated him as a potential security threat were now ensuring his safe passage to visit Private Thompson, the young guard whose collapse had started this remarkable chain of events. Detective Inspector Collins accompanied Marcus on the journey, explaining that the hospital visit had required coordination between palace security, Metropolitan Police, and hospital administration. The unusual nature of the meeting between a civilian tourist and an active palace guard necessitated careful protocols to protect both parties and maintain security. Marcus learned during the drive that Private Thompson's condition had stabilized quickly once he received proper medical treatment. The young soldier had been suffering from a combination of dehydration, low blood sugar, and exhaustion that had been building for several days. His dedication to duty had prevented him from acknowledging his declining health until collapse became inevitable. The hospital staff had been briefed on the special circumstances surrounding Marcus's visit, and the American was struck by the professional courtesy extended to him by everyone involved. Word of his actions at the palace had apparently spread beyond royal circles, earning him respect from medical personnel who understood the potential severity of Private Thompson's condition. Private Thompson was awake and alert when Marcus entered his hospital room. Though still connected to an IV drip and wearing a standard hospital gown that contrasted sharply with his ceremonial uniform from the previous day, the young soldier's face lit up with genuine gratitude as he recognized his unexpected visitor. The guard immediately attempted to sit up straighter and maintain a formal posture, but Marcus quickly encouraged him to remain comfortable and focus on his recovery. The construction worker's easy manner and genuine concern helped put Private Thompson at ease, allowing for a more natural conversation than either had initially expected. Private Thompson expressed his profound gratitude for Marcus's intervention, explaining that he had been aware of his deteriorating condition, but felt unable to break protocol during the ceremonial duties. The young soldier's training and pride had created a situation where asking for help seemed impossible, even as his body was failing him. Marcus learned about Private Thompson's background and his journey to becoming a palace guard. The 22-year-old came from a military family and had worked tirelessly to earn his position among the elite soldiers responsible for royal security. His dedication to excellence had made him reluctant to show any sign of weakness, even when his health was at risk. The conversation revealed the intense pressure that palace guards face in maintaining the perfect image expected by tourists and officials alike. Private Thompson described the physical and mental demands of standing motionless for hours, regardless of weather conditions or personal discomfort. The ceremonial nature of their duties required a level of discipline that few people could fully understand. Marcus shared his own experiences with workplace safety and the importance of looking out for colleagues in dangerous situations. His construction background had taught him that no job was worth risking serious injury, and he emphasized that seeking help when needed was a sign of wisdom rather than weakness. Private Thompson was fascinated by Marcus's account of the events following his collapse, particularly the investigation and meetings with senior palace officials. The young guard had been unconscious for most of the immediate aftermath and was amazed to learn about the chain of events his medical emergency had triggered. The soldier expressed particular awe at Marcus's meeting with Princess Anne, noting that few palace guards ever had personal interactions with senior members of the royal family outside of ceremonial duties. The fact that the princess had taken time to personally thank Marcus demonstrated the significance that had been attached to his actions. During their conversation, Private Thompson revealed that his commanding officers had used the incident as a teaching moment for other guards about the importance of monitoring their health and seeking assistance when needed. The young soldier's experience had led to policy discussions about better support systems for guards who might be struggling with illness or other personal challenges. Marcus was touched to learn that Private Thompson planned to write a formal letter thanking him for his assistance, a document that would become part of the official record of the incident. The guard explained that such letters were rare and reflected the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. The hospital visit was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Whitmore, Private Thompson's commanding officer, who had come to check on his soldier's recovery. The colonel expressed his continued appreciation for Marcus's actions and provided updates on the administrative response to the incident within the palace guard structure. Colonel Whitmore revealed that Marcus's intervention had sparked discussions at the highest levels of military command about protocols for assisting guards who might be experiencing medical distress during ceremonial duties. The construction workers' quick thinking had potentially influenced policies that could protect future generations of palace guards. As the visit drew to a close, Private Thompson presented Marcus with a small gift that he had requested from his personal belongings. It was a replica badge from his guard unit, something that held deep personal significance and represented his gratitude for the Americans' life-saving intervention. Marcus was deeply moved by the gesture, understanding that such items were meaningful to soldiers and represented their pride in their service. The badge would serve as a permanent reminder of their unlikely friendship and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Private Thompson's recovery was progressing well, and doctors expected him to return to light duties within a week. However, Colonel Whitmore assured both men that the young soldier would receive additional medical monitoring and support to prevent similar incidents in the future. As Marcus prepared to leave the hospital, Private Thompson made a request that surprised everyone present. He asked if Marcus would consider attending his return-to-duty ceremony, an informal event where guards resumed their positions after medical leave. The invitation was highly unusual but reflected the special bond that had formed between the American tourist and the young British soldier. The hospital visit concluded with both men exchanging contact information, beginning what would become a lasting friendship across the Atlantic. Marcus had not only helped save Private Thompson's health but had also gained insight into the dedication and sacrifice required of those who serve in ceremonial military positions. Detective Inspector Collins remarked during the return journey that she had never witnessed such a positive outcome from what had initially appeared to be a serious security breach. Marcus's character and motivations had transformed a potentially difficult situation into a celebration of human compassion and international friendship. 3 months after returning to Ohio, Marcus received an unexpected phone call that would bring his London adventure full circle. Private Thompson, now fully recovered and back to his duties at Buckingham Palace, was calling to inform Marcus that he had been selected for a special honor that would require the American's presence in London. The young guard explained that palace officials had decided to formally recognize Marcus's actions with a Civilian Bravery Award, a rare distinction typically reserved for individuals who had performed extraordinary acts of courage or service. The ceremony would take place at the palace with members of the royal family in attendance. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. His spontaneous act of helping another person had evolved from a moment of compassion to an international recognition that would bring him back to the place where it all began. The construction worker found himself planning a return trip to London, this time as an honored guest rather than a tourist. The invitation came with detailed arrangements for Marcus's travel and accommodation, all coordinated by palace staff who remembered his previous visit fondly. The level of organization and attention to detail impressed Marcus, demonstrating the significance that continued to be attached to his actions. Private Thompson shared updates on the changes that had been implemented following their encounter. New protocols now ensured that guards experiencing health issues during ceremonial duties could receive assistance without compromising security or tradition. Marcus's intervention had contributed to meaningful improvements in the welfare of all palace guards. The young soldier also revealed that he had been promoted to corporal, partly in recognition of his dedication to duty, but also as acknowledgement of the grace with which he had handled the unusual circumstances surrounding his collapse. His experience had made him an advocate for guard welfare within the military hierarchy. When Marcus arrived in London for the ceremony, he was amazed by the warm reception he received from palace staff who remembered him from his previous visit. Mrs. Hartford personally greeted him at the airport, explaining that arrangements had been made for him to stay in official guest quarters within the palace complex. The night before the ceremony, Marcus was invited to a private dinner with several palace officials and military officers who had been involved in the investigation of his original intervention. The gathering provided an opportunity for everyone to reflect on how a single moment of compassion had created lasting positive changes. Colonel Whitmore, now a close friend, shared statistics showing that the new protocols implemented after Marcus's intervention had already prevented 2 similar incidents. Other guards had felt empowered to seek assistance when needed, knowing that their welfare was valued as highly as their ceremonial duties. The ceremony itself took place in the same area where Marcus had first encountered Private Thompson in distress. The irony was not lost on anyone present as they gathered to celebrate an act of human kindness that had initially appeared to be a security breach. Princess Anne presided over the ceremony, speaking eloquently about the importance of individuals who choose to act with courage and compassion in moments of crisis. She noted that Marcus's actions embodied the best qualities of international friendship and human solidarity that the monarchy sought to promote. The formal presentation included a citation that would become part of official royal records, ensuring that Marcus's story would be preserved for future generations. The document detailed not only his brave intervention, but also the positive changes that had resulted from his actions. Private Thompson, now Corporal Thompson, had the honor of presenting Marcus with the Civilian Bravery Medal, a moment that brought tears to both men's eyes. The young soldier spoke movingly about how Marcus's quick thinking had likely saved him from serious injury, and had led to improvements that would protect his fellow guards. The ceremony concluded with an unexpected announcement that Marcus would be invited to return to London annually as a guest of the royal household, a privilege that would allow him to maintain his connection to the palace and the people he had helped. Following the formal ceremony, Marcus was taken on a comprehensive tour of areas within Buckingham Palace that few members of the public ever see. The private apartments, working offices, and historical chambers provided him with a deeper understanding of the institution he had inadvertently served through his act of compassion. The tour was led by Mr. Pemberton, who had become something of a mentor to Marcus during his visits. The senior administrator explained how the American story had become part of palace folklore, inspiring staff members and demonstrating that extraordinary moments could emerge from ordinary circumstances. Marcus met with kitchen staff, gardeners, and administrative personnel who had all heard about his intervention and wanted to express their appreciation. The sense of community within the palace impressed him greatly, reminding him of the camaraderie he experienced on construction sites back home. That evening, Marcus attended a private reception where he met other recipients of civilian honors, each with their own remarkable story of service or courage. The gathering reinforced his understanding that his actions, while feeling natural to him, represented something significant in the broader context of human behavior. The most touching moment of his return visit came when Corporal Thompson introduced Marcus to his family, who had traveled from Wales to attend the ceremony. Thompson's parents expressed their heartfelt gratitude to the American who had helped their son, creating an emotional connection that transcended national boundaries. Thompson's younger sister, inspired by Marcus's example, had decided to pursue a career in emergency medical services. She credited the story of Marcus's quick recognition of her brother's symptoms with influencing her career choice, demonstrating how acts of kindness could inspire others to serve their communities. As Marcus prepared to return to Ohio, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple decision to help someone in need. His construction worker's instincts had led to international recognition, lasting friendships, and policy changes that would benefit countless others. The palace presented Marcus with a photo album documenting both of his visits, including images of the ceremony and his meetings with various officials and staff members. The album would serve as a permanent record of his unique relationship with one of the world's most famous institutions. Corporal Thompson accompanied Marcus to the airport, their friendship now solidified by shared experience and mutual respect. The young soldier promised to keep Marcus informed about his career progress and any changes in the guard protocols that had resulted from their encounter. On the flight back to Ohio, Marcus reviewed the formal letter that would be sent to his employer, explaining his absence and commending him for actions that had brought positive attention to American citizens abroad. The recognition would enhance his reputation in his hometown and potentially open new opportunities in his career. The medal and citation were carefully packed in his luggage, along with gifts from various palace staff members who had wanted to contribute to his collection of mementos. Each item represented a personal connection formed through his extraordinary experience. Marcus returned to his construction job with a new perspective on the importance of workplace safety and looking out for colleagues. His London experience had reinforced lessons he already knew, but had given him a powerful story to share with co-workers about the value of quick action in emergency situations. The local newspaper in his Ohio hometown featured Marcus's story prominently, making him something of a celebrity in his community. Schools invited him to speak about his experience, emphasizing themes of international friendship, personal responsibility, and the impact that individual actions could have on others. Years later, Marcus would maintain his annual visits to London, each trip strengthening his bonds with the palace community and allowing him to witness the ongoing positive effects of the protocol changes inspired by his intervention. His story became part of training materials for new palace guards, ensuring that future generations would understand the importance of seeking help when needed. The friendship between Marcus and Thompson evolved into a lasting relationship that included family visits, professional correspondence, and shared advocacy for emergency preparedness training. Their unlikely meeting had created connections that would endure long after the initial drama had faded into history. Marcus's experience demonstrated that extraordinary recognition could result from ordinary human decency, inspiring others to act with courage and compassion when faced with situations requiring immediate response. His story became a testament to the power of individual actions to create positive change across cultural and national boundaries, proving that true heroism often emerges from the simplest acts of human kindness.